Oliver the Great Western Engine. He's a very unique looking engine and was featured fairly heavily in the series from his introduction up until the hit era. Talking of his introduction, Escape is one of the best episodes of the whole show, but that's another video. So this locomotive has really suffered merchandise-wise. Oh my. Of course, I model in 00, and there is Hornby Oliver. He's alright. The colours are nice, and the face is great. Wait, what? Why they decided to pierce his forehead, I really don't know. He's also extremely expensive. So back when I was in the TCC, I decided to make a custom one. He didn't run, and I used quite an odd green. So in 2020, I decided to model him again. And was also set to feature in the yet-to-be-refilmed Christmas special. But I still wasn't entirely happy with how he looked, or any of my models to be fair anymore. Eventually, I decided I needed answers, and flew over to the States to talk to my friend Brendan Reese 10. He is the one with the cool models. He told me that the best way to do this will be to use a 3D printable shell designed by the LBSC Thomas on Twitter, alongside the chassis of the Bachmann Oliver. Bachmann Oliver? I said, gulping and shaking with fear. Bachmann, I don't know how to say it anymore. I don't know. I'm going to say it how I just say it, and I'm sorry if it's wrong, so just sorry. Bachmann have made many models over the years. The earlier ones are probably their weaker ones, as this was when they were first starting out. But they have released some really fantastic models. Edward, Bill and Ben, Duck, Skarloey, Rheneas, but I believe they have one that is definitely my least favourite, and that is Oliver. I don't know if it's because it's a weird CG basis, the huge black area under the smoke box, but this model just looks wrong. It's such a shame as well, because it came out when Bachmann was, and still is, on top of their game, hence why it was such a disappointment. Disclaimer, I have expressed an opinion. Thank you for your understanding. And so, the decision was final. With the Bachmann Oliver finally in my possession, it was time to return to the UK with everything I'd learnt. The first step was removing the Bachmann shell and taking a look at the chassis. To make it more accurate to the show, the wheels were replaced with Henry's, so that they were slightly bigger. Already, he looked much better, even with the Bachmann shell. So, the printing process began, and eventually I had his shell in person. It was at this time my friend Caleb came to stay, and we actually embarked on the huge project of upgrading our engines together. So it was nice to have someone else suffering the pain of resin printing with. The print required a lot of sanding, priming, sanding, priming, sanding, and a little more priming to smooth the warp lines, print lines, and just ensure a really smooth finish. The same had to be done to the running board, and this was a little easier than the body shell purely because of the shape. However, I did feel that the running board stuck out a little too much. So I cut a little section off the front and then re-glued it once lightly sanded to make it a little bit shorter. Eventually, I was happy with the finish, and it was time to search for a green. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to go for with him, but I felt it should be fairly show accurate. I found a green online that I liked, and I went for it. But this was a mistake. I guess I didn't read the advice very well, because I did not use the paint for its intended purpose. The finish was bubbly and not smooth at all. A nice green, but a horrible finish. I think this paint was meant for painting walls and street art, and I just did not realise that. The dreaded sand and prime routine started again. So I spoke to my friend Parva Production as I'd seen they'd made an excellent Oliver of their own in the past, and I asked them what green they used. Humbrol Lime Green was selected. This paint must be discontinued now, because I couldn't find any sites that sold it, apart from a couple of sellers on eBay. But eventually, the paint arrived, and it was time to green Oliver again, along with his wheels. This time, it was a success. I also painted the running board using the grey primer as the top, and a custom red, Senegal red, that is supposedly the red the show used during Series 3 to 5. I remember when I first painted the running board, I did it without looking at reference pictures, so naturally I just painted the front, back and sides all red. Once I put the shell on, something was obviously wrong, but I couldn't figure it out at first. Of course, the sides are meant to be black, so I swiftly got them painted too, and it was starting to look much better. I reprinted some of the Oliver faces made by Thomas Modeler 1, as well as some new additions that were designed by Andrew, the Chairlord on Twitter. These were sprayed with the grey primer and then were painted by the wonderful Mike, Thomas Fan 8. For his accessories, I used gold for the whistle and safety valve, black for the cab roof and buffers, as well as the back lamp irons. I know that in the model series these were just green, but I quite liked the black look on the Bachmann Oliver model, which is of course based on his CG appearance, so I decided to keep it. His decals were the next step. I knew I wanted water slide decals, and in fact, I wanted to get water slide decals for all of the engines at one point. At first, I tried doing it from home. I ordered 2 types of water slide decal paper, white and transparent. The transparent decal paper was okay, but the decals ended up looking very faded, so that was a no. The white decal paper was better, as it kept the colours strong, but trying to cut this thing for Oliver was tricky. I then tried having the middle printed green, and again, this was okay, but I just couldn't get it to look right with my cuts. I tried using my Cricut, which is essentially an automated hobby knife, but I couldn't get it to calibrate properly, and after trying so many times and seeing that this just tended to be a problem for lots of people online, I stripped Oliver of these decals and decided on a new way. I ordered some custom printed decals online. These were printed on specialist printers and sent to me. I did this twice, from 2 separate vendors, and both were okay. They both had the same problem, where the decals ended up faded and see-through. It seems that water slide decals just aren't that cheap to produce, as they do require a very special printer, and the 2 other major vendors that I could find online were very expensive, and so I decided against that investment. Maybe another day. Thankfully, Oliver's decals are fairly common on GWR locomotives and are available on eBay, so I bought proper releases of this weird thing, and then for his number, I just used the one I printed out and cut it to size, since this was much easier to cut and make it look okay. Much better. He was then sprayed one final time with a gloss lacquer to seal the decals and prevent any further chips to his paintwork. Henry's wheels had given Oliver the idea he could do wheelies. To put a stop to this, I had to lower the back wheel and fix the chassis, and 3D printed these things, what are they, to go on the side and painted them black. I also added a 3D printed brake pipe as well as some Hornby screw links. He really was starting to take shape. I then rewired him, attaching a DCC decoder alongside a Soothe 22 smoke unit. In the very near future, I will be releasing a tutorial on how I convert my Bachmann Thomas engines to DCC, so keep your eye out for that. Because the smoke units are 4.5mm in diameter, I had to 3D print a slightly larger funnel with a larger hole to allow the unit to fit in. In the past, I actually used plastic straws, but the 3D printer has unlocked all new possibilities. I 3D printed the funnel, sanded the inside as it was still too small, sprayed it black, and then fixed it to Oliver. Annoyingly, his smoke unit did not work. Well done me, I should have tested it first. Nice. So, I had to destroy his new funnel, as resin shatters like no one's business, 3D printed another one, went through the same steps as before, and voila, it worked! Oliver was almost finished. It was time for handrails, which were a real pain, especially this part, above his face. It's still not perfect, but I can live with it. I added some lamp irons, which were actually modified track pins. These were spray painted in the grey primer and glued on. I then lightly weathered Oliver using some black weathering powder. I didn't want to go overboard, just to show he's used. I think it's a nice look. The lamps were 3D printed and then painted black to prevent light bleed, and then were followed up with a spray of white paint. They were altered to have holes through the bottom and front to allow the light to shine. I used crystal clear on the front of the lamps, and once dry, I painted it with a frosted finish spray so that it wasn't completely transparent, but still allowed the light to shine through. I bought some incredibly tiny LEDs to go inside of the lamps. I slotted them through and dabbed a tiny amount of glue and filler so that no light would bleed through the bottom, and the LEDs would stay in place. The wires were then threaded through a hole in his running board and attached to a small battery pack. I didn't wire these lamps directly to the decoder because I've had problems before where the decoders have become overloaded with the use of 2 functions. So this is just how I decided to do it. The way I've attached them is annoying because once I want to remove the LED lamp, I'll actually have to cut the wire, as obviously it can't get through the hole either way. But as long as it's all hidden when filming, I don't mind too much. And so with that done, he's ready for filming. I'm really pleased with how Oliver looks. He's the first engine I set out to make, and he was the first I finished. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and comment below, and even if you didn't, let me know how I could do better. Thank you very much. I'll see you next.